We fire with our spirit. We fire with our spirit and our heart. A real fireman, an engineer, a true steam engineer. Everything is from the heart, and you feel everything.
We think this is normal for this building to be 70 degrees on a day like this. This is not normal. This does not happen on its own. This is what we make happen.
The transfer, the creation and distribution and use of power and information, it builds all of the world worth living in. So this is sort of a public service announcement. Now that we are on the subject of boilers, and we have a soft soldered copper boiler of minuscule size sitting next to me, we need to talk about the social aspect of boilers, because boy, what a can of worms, and it doesn't get opened enough, and it needs to, because as one of my heroes, the steam heating engineering master Dan Holohan, says many times in his extremely enlightened videos, which I really want all of you to watch, engineering is sociology.
You see, it's the history, the sociology, the American history. All this stuff comes into play in the engineering that we're doing. You got to know these stories.
And he's right. Engineering and sociology and art are all really the same thing. And to engineer is human and to err is human. And boilers, there are so many misconceptions, superstitions, unfounded fears, and founded but very overblown fears. And boy, do they need talking about. And the first thing that I always hear and see is that, oh, well, a boiler is like a bomb.
And that's always the one that's the big scary.
No, it isn't. A boiler is a boiler. A bomb is like a bomb. A boiler is like a boiler. And in fact, a boiler is, besides something like a bridge, the Roman bridge or the great iron bridges of someone like Brunel, a boiler is the strongest structure ever created by human hands. And it takes a consternated effort to destroy one, and it takes an even more consternated and intentional effort to get one to fail catastrophically. And boy, have we in America tried.
What makes a steam choo-choo go kaboom?
Well,
in fact, we are the only country in all of the world who has blown up not one but two boilers in preservation. And I mean blown them up. I don't mean little things like a tube implosion. I mean like firebox implosion, where it killed people, like the traction engine in Ohio or that stupid locomotive in Gettysburg. And then, of course, the many near misses, like the time that people at Kinzer's almost killed a friend of mine when they ran the Avery engine they were using for a steam school out of water. The instructor ran the boiler out of water on that Avery engine, and it was running around with the water underneath the crown sheet about there, like for an hour or two. Didn't blow, because, of course, a boiler is really strong. All boilers, even the ones in poor condition, are tremendously strong. And I've said before, and I'll say again, a steam engine is one of the various technologies of that wonderful era that will not and cannot lie to you. And if part of that is it will hurt you if you deserve it, but it takes a lot to get one to do that. And before then, they'll tell you something's wrong. And if you are too inept, if you're too out of touch to see what you're doing and what it's doing, usually what happens is the boiler will destroy itself before it destroys you. That Avery boiler and all the other ones of the many near misses that are always happening at these stupid traction engine meetups and Threshermen's reunions where the farm boys are. Many of these boilers are just end up horribly damaged. Like, I have a story for you. Here's a great one. This guy had a Baker traction engine, AD Baker. And he goes to lunch, right, and he leaves it parked downhill, so it's at about this orientation, right? So the water is like this, it runs forward and it's not over the crown sheet. And he's just sitting there with a rip-roaring coal fire, comes back from lunch about a half hour, an hour later, and he moves the engine off the hill, so he rolls it forward or something, and it goes level like this. And the water sloshes back to that now red-hot crown sheet that was exposed. It flashes into a whole bunch of steam, and The safety valve lifts, but it lifts so hard. You know, the pressure gauge went like this, and the safety valve exploded like into pieces. It was the loudest noise I'd ever heard. And I just had to laugh, you know, just had to laugh, but it's very, and these American boilers, I should add something. So on these British engines of yours that you're blessed with by these wonderful makers like Tasker and Fowler and Burrell and stuff, the sheets are nice and thick, nice and thick. These American engines are just beyond belief because they would call, like on the cases, they'd call 3/8 plate thick. Like, I have a friend with an Altman, no, sorry, not an Altman Taylor, an Advance, and it was built, all of the outer shell, the outer wrapper, the throat sheet and everything with 5/16, and the firebox, the inner firebox, 1/4, and it was built this way. It was built that way. And so, if you're gonna implode or explode...
I've got to come in there. 1/4 of an inch. 5/16 of an inch.
From the builder. And I had a boiler that I steamed up to prove a point. It was in terrible condition, but this was a little boiler, about 24 or so inch diameter, 100 psi thing for like just general yard use. And the outer shell thickness was just 1/4 as built. And the tube sheets were maybe 5/16. Because the tube sheet you want nice and thick so you have meat to expand the tube against. But no, these American boilers beggar belief because they were cheap. You know, in America it was all about how cheap can we make this stuff, especially for selling it for agricultural use. It was just terrible. So if you're going to explode or implode any boiler, it's going to be one of those because you don't have that much meat on the things. And even still, I have seen them put up with the most tremendous and wanton and flagrant abuses from their owners and from other people, and they just hold up to it. And that engine in Ohio, right? It had all these problems plus more. Like the firebox was down to paper thinness, down to like less than a pitch of 1 turn of thread on the stay bolts, and it had a bad fusible, which didn't go because the fusible metals inside it had oxidized. And once that happens, the fusible material actually gets a higher melting point than the brass the plug's made out of, and all this other stuff. And the safety apparently didn't work. But it only exploded when the thing ran out of water. So, yeah, I don't ever want to hear about boilers from anybody. It's one of those things, you know, you're always learning till you die. I'm still learning. In fact, one of the things I'm here in Britain to do is to get more experience working on and repairing the boilers. But during my career, getting that little license of mine.
Get the license out again.
Yeah. And before I had the license, when I sort of moonlighted in power plants.
What I'll do here, I'll cover your address with my thumb. It'll save me messing about.
Sure. But one of the things about those boilers in that I've worked with, and long before I was...
No, you hold it. It's out of focus.
Long before I was getting this license, I was... this thing right here. The people in this community, there's another thing I need people to understand, is the people in this community, who are working with toys. And to me, a full-sized locomotive, you know, like a big steam locomotive that's not a model on rails, it's a toy. Because I've worked with boilers, and this, I'm not trying to talk myself up, I'm just trying to give people perspective, right? You're working with a boiler that's 10 stories tall, and it's a box filled with 500,000 or 1 million or 2 million tubes, and the fire fills this entire box. It's a water tube once through or something, and the thing runs at 2,000 or 3,000 psi, and the superheater gets the steam so hot that you can light a match off it or ignite a rag, or if you're, and the big thing in these plants is if you're looking for a leak, you'll hear it. You won't see it because the steam, being that superheated, is invisible. And what you do is you take a broomstick or a length of pipe, and the moment you're walking, you know, you listen and you hold the broomstick around, and when the broomstick cuts in half, there's your leak. Because you'll be looking for it, and all of a sudden you'll stick your arm out and your fingers will just come off, or your arm will just get sawn off. Because if you think about the steam leak coming out of a flange, it's invisible. It's like a saw blade. It's not like any steam you've ever dealt with on one of these old beautiful engines. It's kind of a little more serious. You can't see it. You can only hear it, and it's so loud you can't really tell where it's coming from. So you'll be walking around and you'll stick your arm out inadvertently and your arm will just fall off. Oh, there it is. So,
But the good news is, at least the wound would be cauterized at the same time.
right.
So blood loss would be at a minimum.
Right,
Yeah,
so-
let me just jump in there. On like 5-inch, 7¼ gauge, little tiny little things, they don't run it anywhere near that. But if you occasionally put your hand over the safety valve, very close to it, you will get a nice burn line.
Yeah, of course. But see, to me, the other thing too is I'm not trying to say, well, your stuff is inconsequential and all toys, and my stuff is the serious business. No, because see, I'm a man of dualities. I took my license test very seriously, but I said I got it out of spite because of the little people who like to pull rank like arrogant, small penis type people, which I have no time for because, of course, the license isn't worth the toilet paper that's printed on, really, because what matters is you and what's in here and what's in here, and your intelligence and your ability and your character, most importantly. But when it comes to the stuff I've worked with, these before I got this license, before I was even doing it, I moonlighted in power plants. I was running, turbines with the input pressure was 2,000 or more, and we had a high pressure and intermediate pressure and 3 low pressures, and the turbine was 500,000 horsepower or something like this. And what I'm trying to say is, right, I never regarded this as, oh, now this is the serious business, this is the really dangerous. No, none of it's dangerous. The equipment is not dangerous. The people are dangerous. The people working with it. I was in these situations. I worked with wonderful people who were incredible engineers who had everything to teach me and who were way, way higher than me. And I was also in these environments where I was working with people who were so incompetent I would not trust them to successfully operate my toaster or my DVD player without breaking it. And I was like, how are you here? How do you have these licenses? Why are you in this environment? But this is the garbage that you get in America and in a lot of the rest of the world now, because the institutions have collapsed. And all I'm saying is you can't be afraid, no, if it's this or a boiler that you could fit your house inside. If it's a little tiny mamod with a brass boiler that runs at 30 psi or a boiler that runs at 3,000 that's as big as a small office building, you cannot be afraid of it. You must master that machine. You must never be afraid of that machine. You must always, always master it. You cannot be afraid of it. You have to respect it, of course, but you have to respect it like you have to respect yourself. And whether it's a traction engine or a big, beautiful, homely sort of home and hearth Lancashire boiler that you fire by hand with a shovel and a pick and a rake, or it's a gigantic power plant boiler. It's got all these, the firing controls is a control panel or something or whatever. We fire with our spirit. We fire with our spirit and our heart. A real fireman, an engineer, a true steam engineer. Everything is from the heart, and you feel everything. And I can't stand these boilers with the automatic controls that put things between, it puts layers of nonsense between you and the thing. But if you're good, you can still feel it. You're in those power plants, you'll turn that feed water pump switch, the pistol grip, and you'll feel that giant water pump start up, and you'll know, I've got to have my mate outside close the discharge isolator valve, because if I don't do that and I start the pump up and it just builds up to that 4,000 psi feed water pressure all at once, and it slams the check valve open, and that check valve weighs as much as your car, and you could blow the bolts off the pipe flange where the check valve is. No, we got to do it slow. Oh, but because we're in a stupid modern power plant, there is no slow. I can't start this motor up from a slow speed. And if it's a steam turbine driven one, you can, which is why everything in these plants should be steam driven. But if it's electric motor, like my friend John Roderick in the Cambridge electric plant, you hit that switch. If you're lucky, you got a Star Delta soft starter, which puts half voltage on the motor, then full. But that thing, it's going to be a violent start. And you have to know this too, like that motor will be such a heavy power level and duty cycle. That motor will only be rated for a certain number of startups in a day. And if you go over this, you run the risk of blowing up that motor because you'll toast the windings. So there's a lot you have to know, but you must never be afraid of it, and you have to feel everything. You have to do it with your heart. And, okay, if this, just a question for you, Keith. Well, this, I take it, is not going on your channel, right?
No, this is for your channel.
All right, then-
Although really, I've not been speaking because I've been very interested in listening to what you're saying
Right,
about
well,
the relative pressures and.
Sure.
sizes.
So now that I know it's not going on your channel, I'll say the thing that I couldn't say on yours, which is that all of this stuff, you know, the license. Oh, you have to memorize all these formulas, and you have to have a mechanical engineering degree. You have to be good at math. No, it's all nonsense. You do everything with feel, with your heart. You know, this is why Isambard Brunel preferred for the Great Western Railway illiterate men, is because people who don't read and write easily are the ones who do everything by hand, by feel, by color, synesthesia. You know, they call it a disability now, but really it's an ability. And the thing I was going to say was, all right, when you get in bed with your wonderful, wonderful partner, whoever that is, and you make them have an orgasm with your hand, right? You don't do that with math. At least I hope you don't. If you do, there's something really wrong with you and you need help. Bloody oxygen thief you are. But you just feel. And if you do it successfully, you didn't do numbers or any of this. You just did it by feel. Same as if you're driving a car, right? You just know when to put it in the right gear. Or if you're like your mate Nigel, really good, like a rally driver, you can take a corner and you just feel when that car will start to, its tail will come out, the wheels lose grip, and then you drive to that. You're not doing equations in your bloody head. I don't care who says you are, you're not, because I've done it. When you fly an airplane, I've flown airplanes illegally. I don't care who knows. I've flown lots of airplanes very illegally. And I just, sure you have your screw-ups, and if you don't kill yourself with a horrible accident, it's like, okay, yeah, I can fly a tail dragger, I can fly this, I can fly that. And it's just by feel. And if you're a kind of person who has to think before you do something like this, especially if you've been doing it for, sure, when you start, but if you've been doing this for 30 years or 20 or 10 years, and you're a person who has to think before you do any of this, you're out of your depth. You better stop. You gotta quit while you're ahead, because you're not ahead anymore anyway. Find something else to do. Go be an accountant. Go sweep a floor somewhere. Something like that. Go and design.
Be a professional musician.
No, because a lot of them wouldn't do well there either.
No,
because Keith, I know you think that you're all numbers, but I've seen you play, and you do it by feel.
I do indeed.
And I can't do what you do. I can't play an instrument. Oh, well, I can. I can play the musical instrument I play is a steam engine, but all the others I can't play them. You can. What do they call you? A polymath or something? You're like Ben Franklin with this stuff, So that's my message. It really the other problem is too, because of this is something I could talk for hours about. The very steeply declining modern society of the West has over-pathologized everything, because using these beautiful machines, we've made life so easy for people. The light that comes on whenever you hit the switch, the water that comes out of the wall by magic, and it's hot or cold as on demand, and the TV beaming all this garbage into you. And all these other things, you get on a flying machine that goes into the stratosphere, and you're sitting there in a chair like I'm sitting, but you're going 600 miles an hour, 40,000 feet up in the air, and you're sitting next to a guy, and the Wi-Fi in the plane drops out for 5 minutes, and his little pocket supercomputer in his hand goes dead for a minute, and he gets angry, and I just think, you're sitting in a chair up above the clouds, and you're going 600 miles an hour, and the little supercomputer in your hand isn't working right now, and you're angry. You're fucking you're angry. Doesn't really add up, right? But what I mean is, this world, the world of all, where this is true, where this is the reality, to me it feels like fiction. Every time I get up in the morning and I see these flying machines take off from the airports, I feel like I'm a schizophrenic. And it really would be better if I was a schizophrenic, because it would mean that the world isn't insane. But the world of all this stuff being real, the stratospheric flying machines and the pocket supercomputers and the water and the light on demand, has made a generation of people that are so strange-minded and so complacent. And the world that they live in, there's nothing for them to do, so they go and they get these fake little jobs, like they diagnose kids with diseases that don't exist, and then they medicate them with industrial chemicals. People now have way too much time on their hands, and they process loads and loads of meaningless, useless information, and they think they're doing something. They have it completely wrong. This stuff builds the world. Bridge building, engines.
But if you can see the beauty of this and the history of it, and realize that you are a piece of something that is big and important and vital.
The transfer, the creation and distribution and use of power and information, it builds all of the world worth living in.
We think this is normal for this building to be 70 degrees on a day like this. This is not normal. This does not happen on its own. This is what we make happen.
It builds the world that enables us to not live in feces and animal dung and caves and killing each other with spears and rocks and having to go murder something alive to go and eat. And
I read. A couple of years ago, I said, I want to read every book that won the Pulitzer Prize for fiction. And it started in 1911, and it was up to today. And I said, I'm going to read them from the ends. I'm going to read the first book and the current book, and then I'm going to read the next two, and I'm going to read the next two. So I'm reading these books from the outside in, and in the earlier books, they are talking about the heating. They're talking about winter like it's a character. This is something that existed inside as well as outside. This is something that was going to come into your house and kill your children, and you had to protect against it. We don't even think about stuff like this anymore. We think this is normal for this building to be 70 degrees on a day like this. This is not normal. This does not happen on its own. This is what we make happen. So in the earlier Pulitzer books, they are marveling at these things, and they get everything technically right. They're talking about building a fire. They're talking about making a boiler work in New York. They're talking about the magician that comes in here and is able to do this incredible thing called making it warm inside.
And freezing to death in the winter and losing your loved one to the common cold and all of these things. It is very important. It is not some hobby. And they try to mask what runs the world under flat white casings and rule books and formulas and degrees, but it's not that way.
The books on the other end, they're about angst and depression and sex and anxiety. And if they get anything right about if they write about the heating, it's a butt crack joke about the plumber, or they get it technically wrong, which makes me crazy, because isn't there anybody in the book business that's checking these authors? They're talking about pumping the steam. I want to strangle the guy. So I'm reading these, and I'm watching as we approach the middle, 1964, in the middle of the list. And somewhere along the line, we began to do what we do so well that we became invisible.
If you can speak well, and you present yourself well, and you put your spirit out in front of you, not just in what you say, but in what you do, and how you move through the world. This is what great engineers used to be. Not just people who scribbled little numbers down or built something and hid in a corner the rest of the time. No, a great engineer is like a great artist, is like a great king, is like a great doctor, anything, is a fully developed person. And that is the important thing. You must be spiritually and emotionally developed as a living being. That's the key to all this. And again, it's why I love the steam engine. The steam engine is a living being. A power plant is a living organism and a symphony orchestra all put together and all the people in it. A steam engine, there's no machine more alive than a steam engine. Something that we took out of the earth, the ores, the metals, forged into certain shapes that were exactly the right shapes. So we filled it with cold water, and then we endowed it with fire. And we made the fire heat the water and drive the machine, and we created much more than a machine. We created a colleague. We created a friend, a brother that works with us and gives us what we put in. The steam engine is many different things. It's a living creature. It's a mirror to ourselves. The steam engine will reflect you. If you put in badness, you'll get badness. If you put in goodness, good hard work, and intelligence, you get back good work. And that is why I love these machines. Not for any obsessive details. These rivets go here, this size, this wheel is that big. No, that's all. All the technical details that I know are meaningless. The steam engine is a beautiful living creation that shows us what we are. And it freed the animal from slavery. It freed our mind. It freed us from all real physical suffering. And in my opinion, By the 1910s, everything that was worth figuring out for a good human society was already figured out. The running water, the clean running water in, the wastewater out, the heat, the movement of heat energy, where it needed to go, when you wanted it.
Redoing of the Empire State Building. Because he says, we went back to your book, which is called The Lost Art of Steam Heating, and he says, let's put it back to the way it was in 1929. And he said, there's a space above the highest point where the tourists can go, you know, not the main area, but you ride another elevator. He says there's a room up there, and public doesn't get to go up there. He says there's a radiator in that room. He says, I stood in that radiator and called downstairs and told them to open the steam valve, and he says the steam was at that radiator in seconds.
The movement of heavy physical objects at fast speeds, all of this makes a good life. All of this makes a good life because I know what it's like to live without these things, these simple things that aren't really simple at all. And we didn't need anything else. We didn't need anything else, and we certainly didn't need world wars. Because the world...
Sorry, let me jump in. I was just going to say there, it all went wrong in the Great War.
Correct. The world ended.
All the generations who'd made such great things were wiped out.
Correct, and their thinking was corrupted. The flying machine, literally the dream of all humankind to fly, was corrupted by the Great War. They turned the flying machine into a machine of destruction. You don't do that. There are consequences for this. It's like a mother beating her child. It's like these are rules that were written a long time ago in the fabric of the universe. You do not violate these old rules. I'm not a very religious person, but I am spiritual, and I do believe there are old agreements. And a mother abusing her child, and a person turning the flying machine into a weapon of war, these break old agreements. You do not break these agreements. You suffer the consequences if you do. So really, people love to talk about the end times and the end of the world and all this nonsense, but really, to me, in my view, the world ended in 1914 when the war came, the first Great War. We've had wars before then, of course, but nothing like that. And then, of course, the second one just finished the job, and the people who are psychopathic enough to use a nuclear weapon against women and children, no, you don't do that. I don't care who you are, where you're from, what your reasoning is. You do not do something like that, ever. Ever. So the world wars ended the world. And we've been living after the end of the world for quite a long time. And I think really, if you look at history and you really look, you'll understand we've been living post-apocalypse for 70, 80 years in a world not worth living in. The world is distorted. It's freakish. It's freakish. It's a circus. It's a parody of what ought to be a life well lived for anybody. And that there, I think, is the crux of it. We live in a world where the flying machine is a weapon of war. No. Doesn't square up. But that's my view on all this. That's kind of Alex Karnes' worldview in a nutshell. And thank you for your time.